Welcome everybody to the fifth episode of The All. And this episode, like so many other things in life, is brought to you by coffee, the substance that sustains life. Yes, it is New Year's Eve, so I want to wish everybody a happy New Year. Um, we will have a few New Year's related topics, although this episode, unlike the last one, is not going to be a themed episode. It's going to be pretty eclectic. We have a bunch of random little things to talk about today. Um, some of them are actually follow-ups and of things from previous episodes. And that's actually something that I want to have more of in this show as it evolves and goes on because um, I want to get deep into things, and sometimes that requires us to sort of talk about a topic one time and then expand on it in the future. So that way we can keep going deeper and deeper on a foundation that we already have created. Although when you create a foundation, it's usually for a building going up. But either way, we are going to be hopefully getting deeper on into things. Although I am hoping that in 2016, starting in January, we are going to have some themed episodes. And what a themed episode will be is all the questions and topics will revolve around a certain theme or a certain concept or a certain a topic, basically. And I already have a few possible candidates for themed episodes written down, and I'm actually very excited to do some themed episodes. Of course, they won't be all of the episodes. There'll just be some. Last week was more or less a themed episode. It was the personal origins episode, at least the beginnings of personal origins, because I'm sure that, like everything, things will be touched on a lot more. But yeah, I am hoping that this will not run as long as last week because we went way nuts on time last week. It was over 3 hours. I kind of want to make a limit of 3 hours. I mean, if it goes over, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but you know, every extra minute that I put in my video is an extra minute that I'm asking somebody to watch, and it gets harder on a steeper slope the longer it gets. So, you know, asking someone to watch a 3 hour episode is not just 50% harder than getting them to watch a 2 hour episode. It's actually probably 2 to 4 times more difficult just because it just gets, you know, I mean, after all, why are people screaming for Monday Night Raw to go back to 2 hours instead of three? You know, it drags on. So anyway, we want to go back. I want to kind of keep things in that window of 2 up to 3, but not over 3. That's the goal and idea. But we are going to get into some fun topics today. We're going to start with a few New Year's related topics and then get into the meat of the episode. So let's do this. All right. Today's first topic is: do you have any major New Year's memories? And I do. Um, although there is, just like Christmas memories, there's one that is big and more important than anything else. But um, we are going to get to that last just because of how big and important it was. Now, the first New Year's that I was old enough to be allowed to stay up until midnight on was 1999. And for the next few years, it was pretty uneventful New Year's things with the family. We would just stay up late. I mean, at that time, even to me, especially to me, staying up to midnight was such a weird and unusual thing. It felt so late, you know. Saying that now as somebody who um, stayed up until 5 a.m. last night, you know, it's not, you know, it sort of loses its novelty after enough years. But at the time, staying up until midnight was a thing. There was at least one time when I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, where I tried to stay up at midnight, up to midnight on my own, upstairs in my room. However, about 10:30 or so that night, I fell asleep. I just couldn't stay awake any longer. So all that happened. If I fast forward a few years, not too many exciting New Years. When I get into sort of the mid 2000s, a lot of just either being at home or spending time with at most one other person. So, um, one trend that did develop is once Brian and I became good friends, we started spending New Year's together going to Penn's Landing in Philly. We went there from 2010 up to 2013, so that's 4 years, 4 New Years um, that we went there, and it's a lot of fun. They, because you go around the city, you can visit bars or eateries, whatever, and then when New Year's comes, uh, everyone files down to Penn's Landing, and there's a big fireworks show, and it's awesome and cool, and it was always fun to be there for that. Now, after that, 2 years ago, I did my friend Ira, who you might know as Markatron. He's made a few appearances on Sunplant throughout the years. He had been inviting me down to Maryland every year for New Year's, and that year I finally took him up on the offer and went down, which was fun. And that was a kind of a unique story because I was the only non-Jew at this party. Every single person but me was Jewish, and most of them were engineers. It was really crazy, and you would think, or at least I thought, that they were not big, like okay, they're nerdy Jewish engineers. How much can they really party? But man, did they party. There were tons of drinks there. I very rebelliously had beer, wine, and hard liquor all in the same night, and I was completely fine because I'm a BAMF, you know. So that was it. And the thing about Ira is like if he drinks at all, he'll like sip something. He doesn't drink. So I just knew that he would be my designated driver, and I could just go nuts and have fun, do whatever I wanted. So was a pretty fun New Year. Now last year was the first New Year I had spent at home for many years, but I did a special New Year's stream as part of what turned out to be the last ever House of Sim streaming event, and I played an assortment of Nintendo games, and every hour, every every time zone when midnight hit, starting from Eastern time going to West Coast time, I would stop what I was doing and put on a Minecraft fireworks display that my buddies over on the Bobgrad server put together. So that was a lot of fun, and it was kind of nice that there were actually a small handful of people that actually wanted to spend their New Year's doing something as silly as watching me stream. So that was nice. Good memory. And that was last year. This year, I am probably not going to do very much. If I go out at all, it's going to be somewhere local. Um, there's a good chance I just won't go out at all. It's not too much of a big deal, but now I want to tell you about the most important New Year's, and this actually ties into something I was talking about last episode involving my uh, first relationship. So this story takes place 11 years ago, and I don't want to tell the whole story because it would be long, but let's just say I told you how we had that week in November that was the best week of my life, and then from November till December, it was a whirlwind time. We're talking 2004 here. So we were going to go to Penn's Landing for New Year's. It was a tradition that something I had never done, but she had done in the past with certain friends. So it was a sort of a tradition that I borrowed and eventually co-opted from her, which is kind of funny to think about it that way, but it's actually pretty much what happened. And don't mind me, I am live. I am the live makeup department on my own show. There we go. Oh, sexy. Sexy. Woo. There we go. And now that's hot. Okay. Anyway, um, originally we were going to go with some mutual friends. But as with so many other stories I've come to learn, um, everybody eventually dropped out of the plan except her and I. So to um, we went to the train station. We took the train down to Philly, and keep in mind, 2 weeks before we had sort of kind of broken up, even though we weren't officially dating. So it's weird and it's complicated, and it's something I'm not going to get into right now. Um, However, over the course of that night, New Year's Eve in Philly, we gradually started to come back together to the point where we were pretty much as we had been um, when the New Year's fireworks began in 2005 began. Now, what we did after that was we decided to get some ice cream. So we went to this restaurant, lots of people, got some ice cream. We were there for a long time, but when we got back to the train station, we realized that we were too late for the last train out of the city. The last train had left about 1, and it was like 1:30 or 2 in the morning or something like that. So basically, we were stuck in the city until the morning train started, and since it was a holiday, the trains were on a weekend schedule, which means the first train wouldn't be until something like, 7 or 8 in the morning, something really not that early compared to a workday when it would be like 5 a.m. or something like that. So she and I spent the night in the train station together, just sitting on the bench, sitting on the floor, trying to get a few catches of sleep, and things got a little bit. Uh, when I say physical, I don't mean we had sex on the train station bench or anything like that, but we got cuddly, I would say, and we shared our first kiss there in the train station about 3 a.m. on New Year's Day. In this empty train station in Philly on New Year's Day. It was one of the most wonderful and beautiful and poetic moments. It was just like, it was something out of a movie, that happened in my life. And it was really cool. And yes, I did say very first kiss. All that stuff that I talked about with the greatest week and the month following it was all pre-first kiss. It's a really weird and unusual and complicated story, but that is something that I will have to save for another time. But yeah, best New Year's memory by far, without a doubt. And yeah, very nice. Okay, and the next question here is, are you at all superstitious about New Year's Eve? And to be honest, I kind of am, or at least I have been traditionally over the past few over the past while. I always feel that how I bring in the new year is going to affect how that year is going to go. And with me, it's a weird thing because I'm both a superstitious person and I'm also not at the same time. Like, it's one of those things where I know it's not true, but I believe it anyway, or or it means something to me, and in a way, it makes it real to a certain extent. Now, I've become much less superstitious than in previous years. Like, if I was still as superstitious as if I was still as superstitious as I was when I was younger, I would have requested off work. I would have planned something out. But this year, I'm just winging it. I have a few hours between when I leave work on Christmas Eve and then when I go back into work New Year's Eve, and when I go back into work on New Year's Day to do something if I desire. And like I said, I'm either going to be doing something local or I'm going to be doing nothing at all and just hanging out at home maybe looking at the countdown clock on my computer, because there are websites you can go to that will tell you the exact time and give you a New Year's Day countdown clock. So I might just do that. But previously, I kind of felt that if you started New Year's alone, you would spend that year alone. So I don't know if that is in any way a thing, but I took it seriously and I tried to do something every single New Year's. I mean, I could sit here and try to make correlations between how I spent my New Year's and what happened that year, but that would be a long and pointless tangent that really doesn't matter. Maybe next year I'll do that, on episode 57 or whatever I'm up to by then, I'll correlate all those little things. But ultimately, I just try to approach each year with optimism, even though the last 10 years have all been years of depression. As I said before, I've started each and every one of these years with the thought in my mind and the feeling in my heart that this year could be better, and in many ways, certain years are better for certain reasons. There are things about 2015 that were better than previous years, and not the least of which I think is really sort of not even just becoming, but realizing that I am now a conservative really helped to settle and sort of solidify my mental and political thought process, and it really sort of gave me insight into where I've gone wrong in many ways in my life. And also, the fact that I became a wrestling fan in 2015 is no small thing in my life. Like, I can't tell you how much joy um, wrestling has brought me becoming a wrestling fan, and how much I regret not becoming a wrestling fan 15, 20 years ago, because I think being a wrestling fan throughout the 90s and 2000s would have been such a joy for younger me, But that's something else I will have to talk about later. I want to have a wrestling episode in the future, even though it's going to be a bunch of bullshit because, I'm basically a new fan, so what do I know about the history of wrestling or the psychology of wrestling or anything like that? But, I still want to do one. We'll do one next year sometime. Maybe before WrestleMania or SummerSlam, who knows. But anyway, getting a little bit off the topic, but that topic was pretty much done. One final New Year's question before we get into the meaty and substantive part of the episode. What do you think about New Year's resolutions? Because I know there's a big school of thought out there that sort of sees them as silly and pointless. However, I really have the notion that they are, they're good, that they're optimistic, even if only 1% of them are fulfilled, let's say, that is a net gain. That is a positive thing, It is good for people to begin a new year with a goal or an idea or a thought of who they want to be, what they want to do in that year. And, I think it would be a good idea to have resolutions um, that are realistic, because I have had many years where I've made completely outlandishly ridiculous resolutions. For example, 4 years ago, I made the New Year's resolution that I was going to learn German. And I mean, get out of town. I am a lazy son of a bitch. Am I really going to take the time to learn a language, especially when I am not around anyone who speaks it on any kind of regular basis? It That was a silly thing that I should have known was completely unrealistic, and I was way too optimistic when making that resolution. But you know what? Screw it. You can make silly resolutions. You can make outlandish or exaggerated resolutions, because I'm sure that there have been people who have made resolutions that seem impossible or seem very unlikely, but they've gone and done it. So why the hell not? Make big, bold, crazy resolutions. Try to do it, you know, go out and do something next year that is weird and crazy and fun. And of course, for me, 2016 is an interesting year just because I see that little 16 at the end, and I know that's going to be the year I turn 30, and it's going to happen soon. You know, my birthday's in February, so, you know, I feel after January 1st, it all becomes real. You know, it becomes less of something that happens in the future and becomes more of something that happens now. So that's another episode I'm going to have. I'm going to have a turning 30 episode when we get closer to that time. That's going to be a lot of fun. And I guess it's fair to ask if I have any New Year's resolutions. And I think the best New Year's resolution that I can have at this point in my life. I mean, there's a few I have, and I'll go through a couple of them. But I want to start with the one that's foundational, and it's not very concrete, but it's very, very real. And what this one is in this new year, I want to not let people have power over me within myself. I can't do anything if they are an authority figure in real life or if they are somebody who has power over me externally. But what I can control is the amount of power they have over me inside myself, you know? Because when you care so much about what someone else thinks about you, or you judge your own worth, or you judge your own success based on somebody else's acceptance, that gives them extraordinary power over you, and it just unbalances things completely. And I don't want to say I don't want to care what people think about me. What I am saying, though, is I want to not let that, not let whether other people accept me or not, or whether other people like me or not, or anything like that. I don't want that to affect me internally. I don't want that to give them power over me. And I want to be able to say, you don't like me, you don't like what I'm saying, well, that's your right not to, and it whatever, it doesn't bother me. I want to have that not bother me. Now, in terms of what I want to have in 2016, things that are very concrete and very simple. Number one, a new job. Number two, new apartment. Number three, new computer. Those things I want to have happen to me in 2016. And when I say may have happened, I don't mean to use such passive language. I want to make these things happen. I want them to happen because I've made them happen. So I am going to attempt to create a 2016 for me where I do get a new apartment and a new job and a new computer. Not that this wonderful machine hasn't served me well, but you know, it's been 4 years, it's been almost 5, and it's probably time to upgrade, you know. So that's those are my New Year's resolutions. And also, you know, there's the standard, I want to be less of a douchebag. You know, I want to treat people better. I want to make my own personal I want to limit the amount that my own personal insecurities are translated into me being a dick to other people. It just as a venting or as a way to try to relieve pressure inside of me. There's ways to relieve that pressure without treating people crappy, and I feel that while I have made great efforts to treat people better in this past year than I have in years before, I still think there's a long road to go before I treat people in a way that is commensurate with the way that I want them to treat me. And you know, it's very tempting to say, I will treat people the way they treat me. But what you have to do is you have to lead with treating people well, because that often will lead to them treating you better. I mean, it won't always, and don't be a sucker. So be smart about things, but lead with kindness, lead with respect, and you will very often, people are good. A lot of people are good, and they will respond to that. And if people didn't respond to that, then we just wouldn't have such a good society that we live in. Alright, so now we are going to get into the meat and potatoes portion of this episode. And we have a number of questions here, questions and topics that I've posed to myself. By the way, if you want me to talk about something, please comment. I have taken viewer comments before, turned them into topics, and I will continue to do so, so please supply me with these. A few episodes I touched on why I believe that Harry Potter is conservative, despite how liberal J.K. Rowling herself is, and despite the liberal overtones she tried to put on the books. The subtext of Harry Potter is very conservative, especially when it comes to Dumbledore's army. However, I thought of one more reason why Harry Potter is conservative, and I wanted to briefly share that with you. And this comes to Lord Voldemort, his name, and how his name is treated in the books. Now, as you know, Voldemort is the main villain, and he is so feared throughout the world of Harry Potter that people are afraid to even say his name. To them, saying Lord Voldemort is almost so scary that it's like he's going to appear in front of them if they say that. But they say things like he who must not be named, you know who, even his followers will call him the Dark Lord or some other honorific rather than saying Lord Voldemort. Now, Harry has been raised outside of the wizarding world, so he doesn't know who Lord Voldemort is until he turns 11, and he doesn't have that baggage, there's not that weight to that name. So when he's told the name of Lord Voldemort, it doesn't have that same effect on him, and because he didn't grow up fearing it. And throughout the first book, there have been a few times where he will bring up the name, and people around him will flinch, and then he'll like, oh, I'm sorry, and he'll try to correct himself. But by the end of the book, this happens when he's with Dumbledore, our main big good guy, our big mentor wizard character, and Dumbledore says, no, Harry, don't be afraid of saying his name. Say his name, because names have power. And being able to not be afraid to say his name is, being able to name the enemy is important. And we'll come back to this. Now, Harry doesn't fully understand it, of course, when he's 11, but as the books go on, Harry it becomes almost like a thing with him, a thing of resistance and of rebellion, because he eventually really gets to really understand why people are afraid to say Voldemort's name, which makes him understand all the more the reason why he must say Lord Voldemort's name. And meanwhile, Dumbledore, when he confronts Voldemort, he actually calls Voldemort by his given name, which is Tom. The very ordinary, unassuming name of Tom, which Voldemort can't stand to be called, And because by calling him Tom, this strips away all of his power, all of his lordship, all of his Voldemort, all the scary stuff, and just turns him into a regular nobody Tom, the son of a muggle, a non-magical person who was also called Tom. Basically, it turns because a whole thing about Voldemort is he's basically a pretender. He is somebody who, like Harry, grew up outside the wizarding world, but is trying to claim this lineage, which he does have on his mother's side of the family, back to some great wizards of the past. And he's trying to make this case that he is the defender of the purebloods and all that kind of thing, when in fact his name is Tom, this dirty muggle name that is just revealing about who he really is, you know? And it's just brilliant. And here's the thing that comes where I can tie this all in, you know? Being able to name your enemy is very important. It's the very first step in being able to fight them. And we here in our modern world, in our modern um, conflicts today, for whatever reason, we have a big problem naming Islamic terrorism. We are so afraid of saying the word Islamic terrorism because we're afraid we're going to offend and rile up the Muslims. We are just so afraid of them that we cannot even speak their name. And this is exactly what Lord Voldemort was, you know? Either people were too afraid to speak his name, so they just meekly said, "Oh, well, you know who I'm talking about," you know, or his followers were even they were too afraid to say his name. They gave him an honorific, you know, and when Voldemort takes power, there's basically two kinds of people in the world, you know. There are those who are going to just go along with it just because out of fear, because it's made pretty clear, especially as you go on, that Voldemort has next to no true believers anymore. You know, when it's really revealed what he is, most of his followers just lose faith, but they're just so far in and they're scared of pulling out, so they just go along with it. So it's an entire network that's kept together by fear, and it's really interesting how much this parallels into real life because we are letting, we are letting a few Muslims, you know, make us afraid to even say this word, you know, to even call them who they are, and we are afraid to do anything or say anything about any Muslim, and we are doing what so many of the weak people in Harry Potter did when Voldemort took power. They just went along with it. People think, I think there's a word in Islam, I think it's jinn or something. I don't know the word, but it basically means a non-Muslim citizen of a Muslim country. It's basically a second-class citizenship where a Muslim country will allow a non-Muslim to pay a non-Muslim tax and live their life the way they want as long as they acknowledge the superiority of the Islamic state that reigns over them. And basically, that's what these people are trying to be. They are being, okay, we're not offend, we don't want to offend you. People are so scared of Muslims, they really say, they try to call us the racists, but really they're the racists. They see Muslims as these big, scary creatures, and they don't want to offend them. They don't want to fight them. They just want to give in and say, whatever you want, we'll let you have it. You want to move into our countries in the millions. You want us to, dress a little bit more conservatively. You want us to, you know, stop being stop doing things that you don't like. You want us to let you have your own little Sharia zones. Sure, yeah, whatever you want. Whatever, you can take it. You can take it. So that is pretty much what it comes down to. And But it just takes a few good people to, just like Harry Potter does, say the name of the enemy, understand the face of the enemy, and be willing to fight him, even if the enemy is scary, even if the enemy wants you dead, and even if the enemy is just brutal and awful. Because if we don't fight them when they're small and weak, we'll have to fight them when they're large and strong. There were so many opportunities in Harry Potter to fight Voldemort when he was weak, when he didn't have much support, but people not only refused to fight him, they refused to even acknowledge that he was there, you know? And that's what's happening right now. Islam is weak compared to Western civilization right now. It is absolutely, in every way, inferior. And but with so many elements within Western culture being afraid of them and just letting them have what they want, they gain strength. They gain a little bit of strength each year. You know, countries that once had maybe in the tens of thousands of Muslims now have millions of Muslims. They're coming in. They have a high birth rate. They're breeding. This is going to lead into the next question, by the way. And they really are expanding their power and their control in these Western countries. They are creating these little neighborhoods where police are afraid to go into. It is getting really scary, and we're letting them in. We're letting them in because we're afraid to even face the problem. We need a Dumbledore's army in real life. We need Dumbledore's army. And my good buddy Bill Whittle, I will always try to find an excuse to put this face on my show, because he really is the reason the show exists. My good buddy Bill Whittle is doing just that with something called the Common Sense Resistance, which he is still developing, and I'll let him talk about it, But what the Common Sense Resistance basically is, it's Dumbledore's army, and it's going to be awesome. Alright, so we are going to jump right into the next connected question, which comes to this, which is, are you concerned about the growth of Islamic population in the West due to immigration and high birth rate? And the answer, of course, is yes. I'm very concerned. This last year, Germany has let in 1 million Syrian refugees. 1 million. That is insane. I don't even know. I can't even express enough what madness that is. Now, there's so many layers about this to talk about. First of all, there's two reasons why the Muslims are here, or there rather, in the West, in Europe. And they're not directly connected, but they're both connected through the same philosophy, which is leftism, of course, and socialism, and social democracy, and the welfare state. Number one, most Western countries, but especially Western Europe, has a welfare state. And what welfare states ultimately lead to is a Ponzi scheme, where they only work when you have more people at the beginning paying in to the people getting the payout. Yes, there's our frequent guest calling in. We're just going to let that guy. By the way, the guest is the phone himself. It's not the person on the phone. But it's a Ponzi scheme, because the more you pay out, the more people you need to pay in, and the more people you need to pay in, the more expensive it becomes. And the more you pay out, the more people want to get the payout. No one is ever satisfied and says, okay, I've received enough money. They all want more, and so it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it collapses in on its own weight. The only way it can be sustained is if you have a growing population. Now the problem is all these Western countries have an abysmally low birth rate. You need a 2.1% birth rate to continue a stable population. 2.1 is one for the man, one for the woman, and the 0.1 goes to Darwin. They're the people who don't make it or don't want to reproduce or can't, whatever. So you need 2.1% to continue. But so many countries have like a 1.6 or a 1.3 or something shockingly low. And there's no way that these welfare states can sustain themselves based on that. So they need people. And where are there a bunch of people who want to come to the West? Well, in Islamic countries. There are so many people in Islamic countries that are attracted to the prosperity that they see in the West, even though that prosperity was built on a philosophy that is antithetical to their own Islamic philosophies. And even though they hate it when they get there, they hate all the supposed debauchery they see around them. They are, like everyone else, they want to go where the money is, and they're just attracted to the wealth and the prosperity, and they're attracted to the handouts, let's be honest, and they have not assimilated. And like I've said before, people are just scared of them, and they're just not, they're not standing up to them. They're letting them have their little Sharia, little neighborhoods in European countries. They're not European, and they, on the slightest provocation, they'll riot. Rapes have gone up in all these cities because of all these Islamic men. It's just a disaster. And we're letting them in, or rather they're letting them in Europe, because they need workers. Their birth rates are so low, they need people. And the birth rate in some Middle Eastern countries is in the 3-point somethings or the 4-point somethings. They want to live for some reason, unlike these Europeans who just seem to want to die. And when you see that somebody has a death wish, you're not going to respect that person. You're going to grant them their death wish. And so even though Islam is weaker than the West by a good margin, they see us as weaker because we're acting weaker. We are basically telegraphing to them, we want to die, come over and kill us. Not so much in America, but definitely in Western Europe. And the other reason, of course, is, like I said before, this whole political correctness. There is a long history in Europe, culminating in World War II, of an unfortunate trend towards racism, which has existed largely in, the 18th and 19th and early 20th century. And there was legit racism, and people are, rightfully sort of glad that they're not that way anymore, because racism is a terrible ideology. I don't have to say why. However, people are thinking, because we were horrible racists, under the Nazis or under and a lot of these other governments, if we refuse to let even one Muslim or Arab or Turkmen into our country, then if we do that, then we are on a slippery slope back to Nazism. I mean, the fact that the Germans have that fear pretty much ensures that they won't and can't go back to Nazism, that way of thinking. However, they're afraid of it, and they're more afraid of themselves. They would rather give up their own civilization than get tough and just face their own history. So that is a problem. But the thing is, it's not just immigration, but it's like I said, the high birth rate. There might be a lot of Muslims in the West now, and they might be continuing to come in. But the real problem is these Muslim families are having a lot of kids, and those kids are going to have a lot of kids, and we are facing a real possibility that many European countries will become Muslim majority countries within our lifetime. And they're keeping, up until very recently, they were kind of keeping quiet, although they're getting a little bit bigger and they're sort of pushing the boundaries, you know? They're demanding more, they're rioting more, but very soon, within a couple decades to 50 years, certain countries in Europe are going to start becoming Islamic majority countries. And when basically the Muslims have cowed everyone into um, submitting, to them, they're going to take over these countries. They're going to win the elections, and then they're going to basically render the elections moot after that. And we are going to have Islamic Belgium, or Islamic Netherlands, or Islamic France, or Islamic Sweden, or Islamic Germany. These things not only can happen, but they will happen unless we do something about it. It might be too late, though. It's very hard to kick someone out. I mean, no one in the West has the stomach to go round up 7 to 50 billion or million Muslims and round them up and throw them out, and furthermore, that's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do now, and this is a very hard thing, but it has to be done, we have to turn these Muslim children into Westerners. We have to turn them into Europeans. We have to turn them into Brits. We have to turn them into French. We have to turn them into Germans. But here's the problem, and this is why we don't have this problem to this scale in America, because America is is an idea. America is, we have geography. And it's a beautiful country. We have probably the most beautiful country in the world, honestly. But America isn't about geography. America is an idea. And part of that idea is, really the core of the idea is, you can come from anywhere. You can be anyone. And you can come to America. You can do what you want to do. You can be who you want to be. And you will become an American. Muslims can and are becoming Americans. But the thing is, that is not the case for just about any other country in the world. An argument could be made for Canada or Australia, but really, Europe, Englishness is an ethnicity. Frenchity is an ethnicity. These are people groups, and Arabs cannot be those people groups. They can act like Frenchmen, but they're never going to truly be Frenchmen. They can truly be Americans. That's the beauty of America, But what they are going to have to do is fundamentally redefine what it is to be a Frenchman or to be a German, and that definition has to be a multi-ethnic version. And the thing is, that shouldn't have had to be the case. Frenchmen should have still been able to be Frenchmen, and Germans should have still been able to be Germans. But the thing is, the Muslims are here. They're not going away. We aren't going to be sending them all back because it's not the right thing to do, and we don't have the stomach for it. But we have to teach these kids the achievements of Western civilization, how everything that they have in their life came to be, and we have to teach them that it's okay to be Muslims, and it's okay to, whatever, but fundamentally, we live in a Western secular society, and we have to preserve it, You guys and your parents, Muslims, you left your shithole countries because they were shitholes, right? But you're acting the same way that you did when you were there, and you're going to turn your new country into a shithole. And we don't like that. We've lived here. We've worked hard to make it good. We don't want it to be a shithole. And obviously, you want to live somewhere better than you used to live. That's why you're here. So you don't want it to be a shithole. So please let yourself learn why these countries are not shitholes. And then you'll be like, oh, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. I don't want to live in a shithole. I want to make something of myself. I'm going to be this person. But I'm afraid that it might just be too late for America. I mean, for Europe. I don't believe it's too late for America. I believe Americanness, the American dream, and just the idea of being an American is not only a better, compelling story than Islam and Islamism, it is ultimately the most inclusive story. You know, that you can be a Muslim and be an American. You know, maybe you can't be a Sharia literalist and be an American, but you certainly can have the basic Islamic faith because moderate Islam does exist. It is an aberration of Islam. It's not real Islam, but it does exist and it can coexist with America. And this is what we have to do in this country. We have to, well, number one, we can let Muslims in, but we have to really be careful about the numbers. We have to let in, you know, maybe a couple thousand per year at most, you know. We have to let them in slowly, we have to vet them, and then we have to make sure that they understand what it is to be an American, because if they want to come here and be Americans, you know, there is nobody who will hold the door open for them quicker than me, because American is an idea, and there are people all over the world who have the American ideal. You know, they have the American dream. They just happen to be born Filipino or Algerian or Turkish or Swedish or whatever. You know, they're basically Americans who need to come to America. They need to come home. They need to come to the land where their ideas are, where they can be who they want to be, you know? So ultimately, I don't think that America will succumb to this. Europe may and probably will. It'll be interesting to see what will happen when the first European country flips over to being an Islamic country. Because by the time that happens, it will be too late for the rest of Europe. I don't know how they're going to react, but I think that Europe is over. I think that Europe made the wrong choice after World War II. They, you know, here in the West, we had the booming 50s and 60s and everything, and over in Europe, they ran to socialism, they ran to social democracy, and it worked for a while, but you can only pillage so much from the citizens and from the next generation before it really comes around to bite you in the ass. And I think Europe is over. I think the other foot hasn't dropped yet, but it's going to. And if you're watching this, and I'm being serious for a moment now. I mean I've been serious this entire time, but this is a personal appeal. If you live in, let's say, Germany or the Netherlands or Sweden or any of those countries, I implore you, if you're a intelligent, well-meaning person, if you value individual liberty, if you value Western values, please come to America. We need you, and you need America. So come here, please. You know, bring your family, bring your friends, become Americans. You're going to like it a lot better, and your life is going to be much better. And you're going to leave a dying culture, which it just hurts me to say that. Like, I'm part Swedish. Sweden's going to be one of the first ones to go out. I'll see, you know, we'll probably see an Islamic Sweden at some point, you know. We might see, you know, in Islamic Germany, we'll take longer to happen because there's more Germans. But like I said, we have 1 million Syrian refugees just in this year, plus all the Turkmen that have been living in Germany for decades now, plus anyone else who's been coming in or will come in. Eventually, I mean, Germany and France are really the keystones of Europe. And once one or both of them go, that's it, Europe's done. So if and and as far as Canada, I sort of have mixed feelings because they kind of have the Western European thing going on, but they also have a bit of the American notion of, you can become a Canadian, you can become a new person here. So, I don't think Canada's going to follow these people, but it might. But ultimately, America will not, because if America does, it's lights out. It is 1,000 years of the Dark Ages again if America falls to these people. But we're not going to let that happen. We're smarter than that, and we tell a better story, and we have the American dream. And I think that if we hold to our guns, literally and figuratively, we can keep America alive as the lifeboat of the world. And once there is some sort of Muslim enlightenment and they throw off this destructive and tyrannical and terrible system that they've been living under in these shithole countries for so many centuries now, we'll be there to welcome them into the civilized world when they decide to throw this off. Because we did it in the West, the Renaissance happened, and it can happen in the Islamic world. It can, and I hope it will, but we need to keep the spark alive. We need to keep it alive, and if Europe falls, it's going to be all on us. It's going to be entirely USA. I mean, hell, we've done it before. In World War II, there were almost no free countries left in the world, but, we held on, and we pretty much saved Western Europe so they could go ahead and commit suicide over the next century. But we saved them, and we sacrificed half of Europe to Stalin, but 45 years later they got out of that, and the Poles are some of our best friends in the world, and we sold them out, or Mr. Obama sold them out rather. We didn't. Obama did. But yes, if I were president, I would go around to all these countries like Poland and say, you have no better friend in the world than America, and we pledge we will not allow Russia nor anyone else to lay one finger on you, or they will have to answer to us, because the Poles know what tyranny is, and they aren't falling for the same bullshit that a lot of people in Western Europe are falling for. And they are pretty much right next to Russia, and we sold them out. But that's another topic for another day. And we're getting a little bit off topic, but that's what happens on the show. Rambling is something that happens. It's fun. I enjoy it. Whatever. All right. Next, we are moving on to the next topic. This was actually brought up in a previous episode, but we're going to expand on it. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about the Second Amendment and the militia argument, because a lot of people say the Second Amendment has the words well-regulated militia in it. Therefore, people are only allowed guns in the context of a well-regulated militia and not as personal use. It's not a guarantee. Now, that's wrong for two reasons. Number one, the way that it's phrased, it says, in order to have a well-regulated militia, blah, 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 blah. What it is saying is that having a well-regulated militia is one of the benefits of individual citizens owning guns. If they had meant to say that a well-regulated militia was the reason they would have said people will, they would have phrased it like people will be allowed to have guns in order to be part of a well-regulated militia. That is not what is said. They said, in order to have a well-regulated militia, I'm sorry, I had too much coffee. But you know what? This is important enough that I'm actually going to do some on-air, well, not research, but I'm going to bring up the text of the Second Amendment text. It says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. One sentence, very clear. It's basically saying that a well-regulated militia is one of the benefits to being armed, but it's not the only reason. It is, because if they had said that, they would have said, people shall have the right to bear arms in a well-regulated militia. That's what they would have said, but they didn't say that. They said, the rights of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Period. The well-regulated militia is just one of the benefits of that. I kind of wish it wasn't even in there because it creates a lot of confusion, but it is in there and it makes sense. And number two, why this argument is inane is ultimately what a militia is people getting together with their own weapons, with their own personal weapons, because if you issue people weapons, that's not a militia, that's an army. All right? What a militia is a group of private citizens with their own firearms that get together when there is when there's a need, when there's a crisis. It's basically a sort of just something that can be formed just as a citizenry. You have people here and there going about their lives. Something happens, whoop, militia. They come out of the people and they have their own weapons. You need to allow people to have their own private weapons in order to have a militia. That is what it was saying. Because if you issue weapons, that's an army. That is something completely different. So there are two layers of reason why when people say the Second Amendment only guarantees the right to have weapons in the context of a well-regulated militia, those are two reasons why that statement is wrong and silly. All right. Moving on. Okay, we're going to get into something different here. And this I can only really scratch the surface of this topic tonight. What do you think about gay people, gay rights, gay marriage, and what about transsexuals? Now, this is a very big and very deep topic that we can really only scratch the surface of tonight. But like I said, the show is about building on things that are previously been established, but we have to establish them first. So we're really going to only get into the very basics of it tonight. But I want to come out and say I never, during any of my political wanderings that I talked about in the last episode, I have never had a point in my life, as soon as I really understood what a gay person was, I've never had a problem with them. I think that anyone who believes in personal liberty would not have a problem with them either, because who you love, who you want to be with, who you have sexual encounters with is entirely your own business. It's entirely up to you, and it's not the place of the state to say you can't do this. The only way that the state can intervene is if that person is either a minor or is not consenting. Because remember, my right to swing my fist ends when it meets your face. Therefore, your right to have sex with who you want stops when that person doesn't want to have sex with you. So basically, that's the idea of consent. The person has to consent, and by a definition, a child cannot consent because they do not um, possess the faculties to uh, consent. That's the way it's structured. Although it gets kind of fuzzy when you get into like the teenage years. But we have to draw the line somewhere, and 18 seems to be a pretty good number. Arguments could be made for it to be a little younger, but I think 18's fine. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about one person and another person who both want to have sex with one another. And that, as long as they're both adults and they both want to do it, it is nobody's business but their own. And as far as gay marriage goes, I have always thought the idea of putting a gender requirement on any kind of contract to be rather inane, and which is what marriage is in the context of a state. Certainly it has a religious implication for those people who follow a religion. However, in the context of the state, marriage is simply a contract. And no other kind of contract that I can think of has a requirement that one or both people involved in this contract have to be of a particular gender. Now, that being said, I think that the government really doesn't have a place in marriages anyway. Maybe it, the whole reason that marriage became a government contract is because the government wanted to control it. And the why? Why did the government want to control it? Well, it didn't want blacks and whites to get married after the Civil War in many states. Now, admittedly, I don't know all that much about that period of history and the reasons behind that, but essentially, that's what it comes down to. The government got into marriage because it wants to control who got married or didn't, I'm pretty sure, I'm not certain, but, if two gay people wanted to get married in the era before marriage was a state thing, if they had been able to find some sort of church somewhere that was willing to do it, it probably could have happened. I mean, of course, they probably couldn't have found a church that would have done it. But I think as long as marriage is a government thing, you can't have a gender requirement for the participants. I just don't think that's possible. It just doesn't make any kind of logical sense. That being said, though, I believe it is wrong, 100% wrong, for the government to require a church to perform a gay wedding if they don't want to. It is that church's right and that congregation's right to believe what they want to believe and to accept what they want to accept. And if they don't accept gay marriage, if they don't like gay people or gay interactions, whatever, that's their right. You don't have to like it. I don't have to like it. I don't like it. I think it's ridiculous. But if they want to reject gay people, that is their right. It makes them jerks, in my opinion, but they have the right to be jerks. They have the right to say, we don't support or endorse or in any way accept the gay lifestyle, whatever. And yeah, that is all they have to do. They just don't have to accept it. Same way with gay businesses. There was a controversy over, a bakery who wouldn't make a cake for a gay wedding, whatever, If they want to be silly enough to lose money by refusing to do something for somebody, then let them refuse to do it, you know? That is their right. If you are gay or if you support gay rights and you're offended by that, you don't have to shop there. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of living in a capitalist system. When someone does something that you disagree with, for whatever reason, you know, you don't have to shop there. You know, the cake didn't taste good, the cake looks funky, you don't have to shop there. You know, they don't serve to gays, you don't have to shop there. You know, the people will decide if it is or isn't. If it's if enough people decide that it's wrong and it's bad, that place is going to go out of business. You know, so it really just becomes a reflection of the people in the market. What places succeed and don't, and ultimately, when it comes down to it, people care much less about this than the media and a lot of liberals will make it out to be. I mean, um, the thing is, people talk about gay rights as being like the civil rights thing of the era, but it's kind of weird because, number one, gay people make up at most like 3% of the population, maybe a little bit more. And number two, gay people are not a people. You know, they are not, they might be a group in some way or another, but even in the sense that they're a group, that comes back down to the whole sort of thing I was talking about in another episode where um, people have been divided into castes and little groups, and those groups are set against the middle. I believe that gay culture would not need to exist in a society where gays are just seen as people and not gay people, you know? And I think the whole idea that we've tried to turn gay people into sort of an other is actually very destructive because there are tons of gay people out there who would support conservatism because they believe in conservative principles when it comes to the economy and to matters of international affairs and wars and peace. But they support liberals because liberals are perceived as having their back, having their best interest, and conservatives are seen as being anti-gay. And I think that's a mistake. We have to say, you know, the fact that you're gay is irrelevant to us, you know? We don't care if you're gay, you know? That is your own personal choice. You to be who you are, to be who you want to be. We don't care, you know? And the thing is, even if you don't like it, even if you don't like gay people, ultimately, you know, you can't tell them not to be gay anymore than you can tell a business that they can't serve gay people, you know? And of course, we can get into the whole thing about gay, how much being gay is natural, how much of it is being a choice. Um, but that is a topic for another day. Um, and I think this whole gay rights thing, you know, they had a point in many ways. You know, I believe, like I said before, if marriage is a civil institution, then it shouldn't have a gender requirement attached to it. That being said, though, you know, I really do think that they are running a little bit too far with this. They are pushing it a little bit too far, and I think that there's going to be a backlash, and I think there already is a backlash, which is unfortunate because, I mean, it's just, you know, the so-called gay community has really bought into this cultural Marxism really hard, you know, this idea of you know, people being divided into groups and then those groups attacking the middle. It's really something that's infected them. And just because, and what I would like to see happen is a large number of gay people who are gay. I shouldn't even call them gay people because that makes them sound like they're part of the gay tribe. They're not. They are people who are Americans who happen to have a particular um, a particular sexual inclination, and I would like to see gay people repudiate gay culture and embrace mainstream American conservatism. I believe that can happen, and I believe that will happen, but it will only happen when we knock down this perception that conservatism hates gays. Because, some of it does. I'm not going to be, not going to lie about that, but um, I think that we have to say fundamentally we are for individual liberty, and even if we don't like your choices, we understand that you have a natural, inborn, or God-given, if you prefer, right to do what you want and be who you want to be. So therefore, if you want to be gay, you have that right, even if we don't like it. And many of us don't. I don't mind it, but a lot of other conservatives do mind it. But even they, if they're going to be honest, will say, "Yeah, I don't like it, but I don't have a right to tell you not to do it." You know? And a real person of conviction will say, "I will protect your right to do it, even though I don't like it." You know? I forget who said it, but someone once said, "I disagree with what you're saying, but I will fight to the death for your right to say that." And I think that's what we, as conservatives, need to say to gay people. We have to say, we don't necessarily agree with what you're doing, all of us, but we will fight for your right to do it. These Muslims out there that your liberal friends want to surrender to, want to kowtow to, want to keep bringing into the country and keep giving concessions to, these people want to kill you. They want to kill gay people. And, you know, you think that we're bad. The worst conservatives in America are nowhere near what your run-of-the-mill average um, person from a Muslim country thinks about gay people. You let you let this future happen, and you're literally dead. So basically, it's a matter of convincing gay people that it's worse to be strung up by construction cranes or beheaded or thrown off cliffs than it is to, once in a while be called a faggot at a fast food joint or something, which I don't think is too hard to sell because, it's pretty self-evident. But anyway, let's move on to the transgender slash transsexual part of the thing. And in my opinion, at least, this whole thing is infinitely more complex than the gay and the gay thing, because you know it's like I know that they're like for most of my life I knew that there were gay people, and I knew that there were bisexual people, and I had some idea that there were people out there who really believed that they were born the wrong gender. However, I've come to learn that there is a whole range of different things out there, going anywhere from, there's transgender, transsexual, there's asexual, which is another sexual orientation apparently, and there is, you know, gender fluid, gender queer. There's like all these different things that are apparently subtly different from one another in some way, and some people want to be called one but not the other. It's a little bit crazy, and it's very hard for me to understand what's what. And I think that um, it's it's hard to really wrap your mind around what it is, because basically what a lot of people are saying is that um, gender is a social construct, and therefore a person's gender might not fit in with their biological sex. It's something that I don't really understand, but I'm willing to accept that certain people are going to feel more comfortable being um, being the opposite gender that they were born as. I accept that that is possible, although it's really, really a confusing issue for me because, like, you know, there have been, drag queens since the beginning of time and all that thing, basically men pretending to be women, and there's been many cases of women pretending to be men. Um, and you get people who say, I prefer to be, you'll have a male person, or at least a male-born person, or whatever, who will say, I prefer to be called she and a woman, and I want to put on makeup and dresses and dress like a woman and be a woman. And it's like, okay, I guess that's fine. A lot of people might not like that, but once again, personal liberty, you have the option of doing that if you want. Um, but then things get a little bit difficult when a person will say, I don't just want to be a woman, I am literally a woman. Then it gets into sort of a philosophical issue of what is a woman, what is a man, what is a what is gender, all that stuff, and it gets so wibbly wobbly that it's really impossible to give a concrete answer to what is going on, what is what. And I think that this transgender thing has come on very quickly. Like, I don't remember hearing about this very much at all when I was in high school or anything. The gay rights thing was starting to take off, but I only ever heard transgender in passing. But it's turned into a big thing in the tens, and I think problem, one of the problems with it is it's just very confusing for people to understand. I think, they, it's very, I guess one of the points they're trying to make is it's very hard to categorize people, and saying a person is transgender is not the same as agender and genderqueer, but like the average person on the street is like, okay, I know what a man is, I know what a woman is, and there are some men who want to be women and some women who want to be men. I understand that they exist, and I don't know where all these, 10 different terms for that come in. It's a little bit too much for your average person to understand, and you know it's and also the other problem with it is I think that transgender people and transgender rights activists are really hurting themselves by trying to get not they're trying to shove this down people's throats way too fast. I think if they slowed down and gave people a little bit of time to comprehend what they're talking about, I think people would be a little bit more receptive to it. Because, you know, if somebody is born a man and feels more comfortable being a woman, you know, I think your average person would have sympathy for that person's plight. It's a strange and weird situation. But, a lot of these, I'm not saying all, obviously, transgendered activists are like this, but there's a bunch out there who just get in your face and demand that, like, I am a woman. It's like, and your average person is not going to understand what that means, and they'll be like, but you're a man, you have male parts. Like, no, I'm a woman. And to really unpackage what that person means by I am a woman, you really have to get into like a lot of psychology, you have to get into a lot of neurology and philosophy, and it's a very difficult thing to get over to somebody, but just bludgeoning them with I'm a woman, and that's how it is, that's the reality of it. That is very hard for people to swallow, I think. So I think ultimately if a person who is a man decides that he is better off being a woman and wants to be a woman and feels more comfortable as a woman and wants to be addressed by she and ma'am and all the rest, then I think it's not too much of a bridge to cross for people to respect that and be like, okay, whatever. It's if it makes you more comfortable, if it makes you happy, it doesn't really, it's no real I don't lose anything by calling you she instead of he, so whatever. But things are, you know, there are some transgender people out there who are trying to get like special accommodations and everything, and just trying to really buck the established social order, and it's really a hard sell. And these kind of things have to happen gradually, and I really think that they shouldn't come in with the arrogance of this is how I am right, you're wrong, shut up. And I think if they have the attitude of, okay, I understand this might be weird to you, and you might not understand why I feel the way I do, but if you would please let me explain how I feel that I'm really a woman, even though I appear to have a man's body and I have male DNA and, all that. If I really explain to you, if you if you would be so kind as to allow me to explain why I believe this about myself, you know, I'm not saying that you will come around, but maybe just think about it, just consider it, ponder it, you know, and if you decide you don't like it or don't understand it, that's all right. Just don't try, just leave me be. Don't harass me for being who I am. I think that if transgender rights people come at it from that um, angle, I think there would be a lot better of a reception. But I think there are so many within that community who have gone so far off the deep end that it's beyond your normal person's ability to comprehend. And you know, and that isn't even getting into the whole gender fluid, agender, gender queer stuff, where a person either feels they have no gender or they feel more like one gender in one day or another. That's like at that point, I really think things start to break down a little bit and things start to get really murky. And I just don't know. It just weird. They like if you want to give yourself whatever label, fine, that's your right, but um, don't demand that everyone accepts that and understands that just because you say it. It's something that people really are going to need time to comprehend. But by and large, as I said, people want to, if they want to be transgender or agender or any of these other labels, that is their right. They can do so, and it's nobody's right to tell them they can't. You know? So, the thing is, though, like the whole gay and transgender people thing has been so trendy in the last few years that I do actually worry that there's a bunch of people who aren't really gay or aren't really bisexual or aren't really transgender who think that they are and will put these labels on themselves without really understanding. Like they'll have a thought once, like, you know, there are plenty of men out there who once in a while will do something girly. Like, I don't know, put on a dress or paint their nails or play with dolls, whatever. But they don't think anything of it. They're like, okay, I know what I'm doing is a little bit weird, but whatever. But that doesn't mean that they are girls. And I think there are people who, like, hell, when I grew up, I played with dolls with my sister, that nothing wrong with that. Nothing unmasculine about that. It might be a little girly, but that doesn't make me any less of a man, you know. I play The Sims, that doesn't make me less of a man. I watch football, that doesn't make me any more of a man. It's a kind of silly. But ultimately, um, it's a lot of these people who might have more feminine traits to them, or they might enjoy more girly things. In previous generations, that would be that. It'll be like, oh yeah, whatever. I'm a person who likes a few more girly things than average. But in this generation, in these modern times, I feel that there's a lot of people out there who are going to say, oh, this must mean I'm literally a girl, or I'm literally, gender queer or gender fluid or something like that. And I think there are a lot of people who are jumping on that bandwagon, and it's just it's very difficult. It's just very strange, and you know, and I don't want to be flippant, but I think it's not a big leap from those kind of people to the kind of people who literally think they're dragons or they're wolves or something. They're not just cosplaying or pretending, they literally think they are. Those people are apparently called otherkins. This is something I learned very recently. Um, and, by the time you get to that point, things have completely unraveled. And just this idea that you can identify yourself as whatever is just like, I don't know. I think that all these other things that are coming out this decade push things a little bit too far to the point where nobody understands what's what anymore, and it just is very tempting for so many people just to throw it all out and say none of it is relevant. Men are men, women are women, and that's that. A lot of people are just going to say that just as a reaction to all this confusion, and I really don't blame them, to be honest. I'm a person who spends time thinking about things, and I'm willing to entertain the idea of, transsexuality and all that, but there are plenty of people who just don't have time for all that because it is too much too fast. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are jumping on the bandwagon who aren't necessarily, really, they're not really gay, or they're not really bisexual, or they're not really agender or whatever, but it sounds, it feels good to be, there is a certain excitement about feeling like you're part of a minority class and that you're, it just, being an average American, being in the middle is like has been turned into such a negative thing that people try to grasp at any kind of outside group they can be part of. I remember back in my own wee liberal days when I was 18, I knew I was a white, privileged white male, all that bullshit, but I desperately wanted to be part of these groups, and I found a way to make myself part of 3 different minority groups out there, and I can't for the life of me remember what they were or how I managed to fit myself into them. But, it made me feel better about myself that I wasn't just this, white American, middle of the road kind of person. But, it's really ridiculous. And the point of all this is, you know, being gay might be a thing, being transgender might be a thing, but a gay person is not a gay person. It's a person who is gay. Gay isn't a tribe. It's not. And I don't believe it's an identity. At least it shouldn't be. I think that gay people are just people, and as soon as we can start seeing them that way, the sooner we can get some of these guys on our side, because there are a lot of gay conservatives, like I said, who will not support us just because we are, perceived as being anti-gay. So, that's the roundabout way of saying it. All right. So that was fun. We got one more big question, and this is a bit of a change of pace, but the question goes, why do you think anti-Jewish conspiracy theories have had such power over time? And this is something that has fascinated me for a very long time, because I have to be honest, I am fascinated by Jewish people. They almost seem to be cut from a different mold than the rest of us, and I don't say that in any kind of negative way. In most ways, it's very impressive, because you have this group of people, which is relatively small compared to the rest of the world, that has basically, for thousands of years of their history, hasn't had one geographic place that's a home. You know, they have been all over in small pockets throughout, you know, mostly Europe historically, but also, you know, the Middle East and later on North America. And through all that, while they've changed languages many times, they've adopted some local customs, they've always remained Jewish. You know, they've always retained their religion and their customs and their identity, and to a certain extent, even their ethnicity, to an extent. You know, not obviously not to a perfect extent, but it's really fascinating to me how they managed to do that. And in the modern age, we have Israel, which is a fluke and an anomaly in so many ways that it just astounds me. Because you have this country that, you know, before the 1880s, there were almost no Jews there. There were probably, you know, a few here and there, but by and large, there just weren't Jews. But then in the 1880s, they started to, the Zionist movement began, and Jews started to move back into the area because it was their ancestral and biblical homeland, and they felt they had a right to that land. Whether they did or not is a different topic, but lo and behold, they came there and they sort of built a society, a brand new society, out of various people who came from all over, like the Jews who came to Israel, came from all over Europe, from the Middle East, from Russia, from the Americas, and these people had been separated for hundreds of years and lived in hundreds of different lands, but they somehow managed to all keep their Jewishness, and because they all kept their Jewishness, they were all able to form a cohesive society together. They were able to resurrect a language that had been dead for thousands of years. I mean, modern Hebrew is obviously different than ancient Hebrew, but still, they managed to revive this dead language, and they turned it into a native tongue for all the generations that were born after that, which is incredible. I've never heard of this happening anywhere else in the world. And the thing is, many times the Arabs in the neighborhood tried to destroy Israel, which both in population and geographically is much, much smaller than them. But the Israelis have won every time, which is astounding. It's miraculous. And when you look at Israel today, you know, let's be honest, all the countries around Israel, for the most part, are shitholes. They're just nasty, wretched places that you would not want to live, you know? But Israel is doing great, you know? It's got a Western society. It's very wealthy. They grow most of their own food. In that little tiny country that's mostly desert, they manage to grow 90% of their own food. And they're highly educated, they're highly motivated, and they have a will to live and defend themselves like nobody else I've seen. I mean, I have the utmost admiration for Israelis, and I think that it would behoove America to learn a little bit from Israel because I think there's a lot we could learn from them. You know, a country of 6 million people that used to have much less than 6 million that just takes care of itself in such a way that it is remarkable. However, you know, we're getting to the conspiracy stuff, and you know, I think that there are two main reasons that these conspiracies have had such power over time about Jewish people. Number one, I believe these conspiracy theories have arisen and maintained because of a feeling of otherness. You know, like I said before, the Jewish people have always maintained their Jewish identity wherever they've lived. And one thing I've learned about Judaism is there is a section of the Torah or whatever that has a bunch of rules for how Jews should live. You know, And there's like 600 something rules in there, and obviously modern Jews don't follow them all because there's a lot that would be very difficult to do in a modern world. But you know, a lot of these laws involve food and customs and things, and the Jews, because of those laws, would not take part in a lot of the local customs because they went against one of those laws. The whole not eating pork thing, or combining meat and cheese, which I think is rather inane. But whatever. That's their culture. They have the right to you know do that, to refuse to eat certain things. But I think it bothers people when somebody is like, it's like a buddy of yours is like, hey man, I'm having a party. Want to come to my party? It's like, no, I'm not going to come to your party because you do things at that party that I disagree with. It's you might be like, oh, okay, but you feel just like, what a dick. And I think those what a dick moments added up into sort of this anti-Jewish sentiment, and a lot of conspiracies have come out of that. But that is the smaller of the two reasons. The bigger and most important of the two reasons is jealousy. People are jealous of the Jews, especially modern Arabs and Muslims, because the Jews have always done so well. And you know why they've done well? Because of their attitude. We've talked about attitude before, and how Western civilization has done so well because of our attitude, and how wealthier people are wealthy because of their attitude, and poor people are poor because of their attitude. Yes, we have talked about this. And the Jews, historically and in modern times, just have such a strong attitude about work and education, and just making it, and it it really makes for successful people. And Jews have always been more successful than average, even when the odds are stacked against them, even if there is anti-Jewish legislation, or just like Jews can't live here, they have to live in these parts of the city or these parts of the country, these kind of rules that have always existed throughout time. You know, they've always prospered even despite that. And now that they're in Israel, they took this land that was sort of just another piece of the Levant, of the greater Middle Eastern area, that was probably no better off than any other part, and they turned it into this modern Western country where everyone is doing much, much better than any of their neighbors. And they did this. It really came out of nowhere. These people came from all these other countries and just made Israel. They wanted to make it, they desired it, and they did it. They worked at it until it was made. And they defended it too. They defended it several times against attack from numerically stronger, larger armies. But they won. And that belief in themselves and that belief in their civilization is really impressive. And I think that we here could learn a lot from the Israelis, and from Jews in general, just because their attitude really exemplifies the Western attitude. And you know, but people are jealous. We've talked about how the Islamic world is jealous of the West, and the thing is, they can be jealous at America or England or something, but they're far away. Israel is right there. They can literally look and see Israel from some parts of their countries, and they see how well these Israelis are doing, and they feel inferior, and they just can't stand it. That's why they have to slander the country and make them seem like bastards. Like these people are only wealthy because they have plundered other people. Sound familiar? Sound like the American left? Yeah, it's a very similar kind of thing. And of course, the big paradox in all this is that Jewish people, at least in America, are by and large liberals, which hasn't always baffled me, but it has really started to baffle me, once I started to think about it, because they're supporting a philosophy which gives aid and comfort to the people that want them killed. It's insanity. But I think ultimately a lot of why the Jewish people support liberal policies is because they're very big-hearted and very charitable, and they really, when they use their brains, they think about problems that pertain to themselves and their immediate lives, and they don't really spare the brain power to think about these big societal things, which is actually like the way things ideally should work. But they just, I just don't think, by and large, a lot of Jews understand that they are voting in systems that are antithetical to their core attitude. And and the thing is, the Jews will tend to break with liberals when Israel comes up because, as much as mainstream liberals do at least give mouth service to being pro-Israel, um, when it comes down to it, many of them have a very uncomfortable level of support for, organizations that are quite anti-Israel. So the Jews will break with the liberals when it comes to that, but they'll come right back when they start talking about like economy and things. Maybe it's just because I don't know. It's very difficult. I just don't understand it. I My only theory is they are just big-hearted people who spend all their brain power thinking about things that are relevant to them, and they don't really put that same critical effort into thinking about uh, things outside their immediate community. And so therefore, because they're not thinking, the liberal stuff feels better, so they vote for that. That's my theory. That's the best I can do. And it sounds dumb, and it probably is dumb, but that's literally the best I can do. So, you know, I just hope that, just like gay people, I think that Jews are another group of people who really can be tapped for conservatism that haven't been. And on top of that, or in addition to that, I think millennials are a huge group of untapped conservatives that have to be tapped into too. But sadly, that topic will have to wait for another day because we are reaching the end of the show. And I always like to have sort of a wrap-up, cool-down question that just sort of eases us into the landing, onto the runway, so we can taxi on into the airport and I'll get lunch. So anyway, the final question today is going back to New Year's. What do you hope to see, do, or accomplish in 2016? Well, as I alluded to earlier on in the video, I'd like to get a new job, something that has consistent full-time hours and pays enough that I can support myself in my own place. I mean, living here is kind of ridiculous. I can't be guaranteed to do this show without being interrupted by somebody coming down those basement stairs. Then I have to pause the show, then I have to sync the video together afterwards, and it's a pain in the butt. It's just easier if I could just do it all in one shot, but I don't have that luxury. I don't have the luxury of having my own space. Um, and more than that, I don't have the luxury of choosing who I spend my time with because, I see my parents every day. Even if I don't, strictly speaking, spend time with them, I still walk into the kitchen and they're in the kitchen, and so I have to interact with them. And I don't want anyone to get the impression that I don't like my parents or don't want to be around them ever. just every day is too much. I'd be happy if I saw my parents maybe 2 or 3 times a year. In an ideal world, that would be all that I would see them, at least at this stage in my life. Maybe if I was a little bit older, I'd feel a little bit different and want to see them a little bit more often. But hell, my mom sees her parents only 2 or 3 times a year at most, and that seems to just be how life works sometimes. And that's really all that I desire to see them, and that's probably really all they desire to see me too. I mean, if I was to come right down and say it, you know. So yeah, I do want to get my own job, and I do want to get my own place, and I do want to get a new computer. I mean, this computer is very good, and it has been adequate for everything that I've tried to do so far. But there are times, you know, I try to run City Skylines, and it wheezes, and you know, it sounds like it's going to have a heart attack, and you know, same thing when I do Civ 5, or I try to run the Minecraft server. Certain things get a little bit crazy, you know. So it is quite it is quite a good machine, and it only cost a little under $600 to put it together, and it's lasted me all this time, which means I've had the benefit of using this computer for less than $1 a day, which is a really great bargain when you really think about it, you know. But you know, it's just because computers advance and things change, it's better. You know, you got to move on. So I'd like to get a new computer. Of course, that can only happen if I get a new job and I put a little bit of money away where I feel comfortable paying for a new computer and not feeling like I'm screwing myself by doing that. So those are things that I want that I already touched on. You know, there's other things that I want in 2016 that I think are not too inconceivable. You know, well, I don't know. Really, those three things are the three things that come to mind. You know, there are things I'd like to see in 2016. I'd like to see President-elect Ted Cruz at the end of the year. I think that would be pretty cool. It's kind of interesting. I have to talk about Ted Cruz a little bit in the future because people are really waking up to him. Both supporters and detractors are really waking up. He's flown under the radar for so long that he's catching everyone by surprise, which is really interesting. So that is something that I will be talking about in the future, in the near future. But I like to see a president-elect Cruz, and hell, it's someone like Rubio. Or, here's where I get controversial, I'm actually starting to warm up to Trump a little bit. Now, he's still by no means my favorite candidate, but I don't have quite the disdain that I did even a month ago, you know? So, but that, like I said, that is something that I'm going to have to talk about in the future. And I know that's going to be one thing that people are really going to try to jump down my throat about if anyone does actually watch the episode, which can't be guaranteed. But it is something that we're going to be talking about. I'd like to see in 2016 the All continue every single week throughout the entire year, and by the end of the year I have 57 episodes. You know, one for every week plus the 5 that we've had in December. I think that would be rather cool. I'd like to take the show live, although I haven't done that so far because of the reasons I stated. I really need to be in my own place before I could do that. And, you know, there are reach goals. Like, wouldn't it be nice to be in a relationship in 2016? You know, the chances of that, you know, given the last several years of history, just don't seem that high. But wouldn't it be nice? I think it's not impossible. I don't know. And, you know, ideally, every year I like to think that this depression will end. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I think the situation of me still being depressed and still being single are still going to be the reality I'm going to be facing at the end of 2016, just as I'm facing it at the end of 2015, and every year before this, going back to 2006, the end of 2006. So I don't think that's going to change, but I want to have the optimism that it at least could change. So who knows? New relationship sometime in the year. I'd like to think it's possible. I'm not holding my breath for it. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be with someone again. It just doesn't seem, it, I just can't conceive of it at this point. I've been single for so long, and I just don't comprehend how that whole thing works, how dating works, and how girls work, and how any of that works. Like, I just have thrown up my hands, and I said, I just don't know. I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to be a player. I don't even play the game. And it is awful. And I don't think I'll even have a chance of reversing my depression until that changes. And I can't even guarantee that that will change my depression. But what I do think what could work is I focus on the things that do seem more possible, which are new job, new apartment, and new computer. And by doing those things, they make the other things, like finding a girl and ending this depression, they make them all the more possible. So basically, if you have a big problem in life, you cut it up into little problems and solve the little problems, and by in doing so, you solve the big problem in many cases. So that's what I want to see in 2016. I'd also like to see, I don't know, I'd just like to see people that I care about and people that I know just do well in life. Even people that I don't necessarily have positive feelings towards right now, I really would rather them be happy than not, because that would be very petty and jealous of me to say, I hope person X has a miserable year. No, I want them to have a good year. So that's what it comes down to. But I think that that's about all I can say about that, which means this show is about to be wrapped up. So I want to once again say thank you to anyone who's made it to the end of this, the 5th episode of The All. And thank you all so much for watching, because this show is like really something that nobody should watch, because who the hell am I? I'm a loser who doesn't have my life together, or who basically knows nothing about anything. When I speak about things, I don't speak from a position of authority on anything. I have no credentials, and there's no reason that anybody should listen to anything that I say. But I speak and I talk because, not just because I want to, which is reason enough in a free country like America, but because I feel I need to. I feel I need to do this. And if any of you out there are watching this and you made it through this episode and all the others, then you are awesome in my book, and I really appreciate you, and I want to reinforce that every episode, that I appreciate you, even if you don't agree with me, especially if you don't agree with me, because maybe you've learned something, maybe you've had a point of view challenged, and maybe you'll think of a way to challenge me, and that would be quite nice. That would be quite interesting. But ultimately, if you're watching this, I appreciate it. That's all I want to say. So anyway, that brings us to the end of episode 5 and the end of 2015. So once again, I want to wish everyone a happy new year. I'll see you in January in 2016 for some new episodes of The All. So thank you for watching. See you later.